Welcome to The World Today. I'm Waqas Majeed Khan. Today we're talking about Khaja Asif's visit to Russia. As everyone knows, he is visiting Russia, and there have been a number of conversations that have taken place regarding the security situation in the region. And that is going to be our first topic that we'll be discussing. Our second topic is going to be regarding the International Day for Mother Languages. And we'll have a conversation regarding mother tongues all over the world as well. So that is the agenda for our program today. Let's begin our conversation. I'd like to introduce my guest in the studio for the first topic is Dr. Sheryar Khan. He's a foreign affairs expert. Let's begin the conversation. Thank you very much, sir, for joining.
Thanks for inviting.
Sir, as you and everybody knows that Khaja Asif is in Russia for a very important meeting, but it is also to bolster counter-terrorism capabilities of Pakistan, seeing how the relationship between the US and Pakistan is deteriorating day by day. How do you see the importance of this particular visit at this point in time?
This visit sometimes, some people look at it as in context of the United States pressure. But I think we are improving our relationship with Russia for quite long now. If you recall, in 2016, they had sent their, troops, for joint military exercises. So there is an increased cooperation between the two countries. Now, this particular visit is important because you have seen that United States is mounting pressure on Pakistan. And Pakistan primarily do not accept that world order that United States is promoting in this region. Russia, on the other hand, has a different perspective on the world affairs. And at the moment, it seems that the Russian perspective is aligned with the Pakistani perspective. And that's why Russia itself wants to improve relation with Pakistan. And in that case, they have invited our foreign minister to visit there and to discuss terms. Now, if you look at it, the commonalities between the two countries, the concerns, the security concerns that we share in this region, they are the same. For instance, Russia is very much serious about the threat from Daesh in the region, which have, built its havens in Afghanistan. And Afghanistan, it borders Central Asia. Now, Central Asia is considered by Russia as its backyard because Central Asia is quite much attached to it, not only historically, but at the moment as well. And from there, Russia starts from Central Asia. So their primary security concern at the moment is Daesh. And that's why they're also taking part in operation in Iraq, in Syria. Pakistan, on the other hand, can also be very instrumental in defeating Daesh in this region because Pakistan has gone through an experience of high-rise militancy and defeating it. Now, for Pakistan as well, this can be a problem. So far, it's not that a big problem, but they have footprints here as well. So we share that with Russia. And because of that, because it's such a big security concern for Russia, that they want to cooperate with Pakistan. And not only this, there's another commonality as well. For instance, the vision in Afghanistan that Russia wants reconciliation there. With all the groups except Daesh. And Pakistan has always proposed that there should be reconciliation and peace process going on. There should be diplomatic and political solutions to the Afghan problems.
Absolutely.
This vision is also shared by Russia. So in this backdrop, the visit, this high-level visit, by Pakistani foreign minister to Russia for 4 days and discussing all these counter-terrorism there, with Russia, and also the drug, traffic, which is quite, a nuisance for Russia and as well as for Pakistan. And drug money then feeds terrorism as well. So these are all interlinked, connected.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's very important in that regard.
Well, I'd also like to share a few of the things that Sergei Lavrov has said, and he's also talked about the two countries forming a commission for military cooperation. And he says that we have confirmed Russia's readiness to continue boosting Pakistan's counter-terrorism capacity, which is in the entire region's interests. Now, that's a very pertinent statement being made by Sergei Lavrov. How do you view this particular statement in the context of what is happening in the region?
My impression of the Russian strategy in the region is this. They want to take the local stakeholders on board, like Pakistan. Pakistan is an important country and player in these regions. So they want to take Pakistan on board. Now, when they say they want to build our counterterrorism capabilities, it's because they believe that Pakistan has a role to play here, and it's playing a role here. And because of that, they want to closely cooperate with Pakistan because we share the vision with them, the security vision for this region. But I believe it's not only security cooperation that we should have with them or we're having with them. It's also political and it can also be diplomatic because in international fora, Russia is still, a major power. It has an influence and Pakistan needs that diplomatic favor from Russia and international fora. So if we work together with them and cooperate closely with them, Russia can support us diplomatically on different international forums regarding certain issues on which United States is not quite helpful at the moment.
Well, let's say better late than never.
Yeah.
Well, moving forward, sir, the Russian foreign minister has also pointed out some other realms in which bilateral cooperation can take place. Especially, he spoke about trade. He spoke about economic cooperation with Pakistan, especially in the energy sector. So, in your opinion, how can the Russians really help Pakistan with the energy issue? Although we have been able to overcome the energy problem to a great extent, but still, looking at the future, how can we make sure that energy cooperation and other economic cooperation with Russia can also continue?
Yeah, it's really a positive step, and Russia, we have cooperated in the past. Russia helped us build the steel mills, Pakistan
Absolutely.
steel mills, and their expertise in energies and their huge reservoirs of energy, oil and gas, and then their expertise in building that it's second to none. So. And it's also, it's close to Pakistan and it has an effect, influence in Central Asia as well. So I think they can help Pakistan, not only in energy sector, but also trade, because the intra-regional trade between, let's say, Pakistan, Central Asia and Russia, it's minuscule at the moment. So there is a great potential for it to increase. And it should be followed up then by the visits of the chambers of commerce of both the countries, and they should be given incentives, to come over to Pakistan, to invest in Pakistan. And my impression is that they are quite keen to invest in Pakistan, and they can also be made part of the CPEC, so they can come there. Because at the moment, if you see China and Russia, they seems to be on the other side of the spectrum when it comes to the global governance or let's say global order, and they can cooperate and they do cooperate with each other. So it would be welcomed by China as well, and Pakistan would already welcome it.
And considering the situation in the region, it is imperative that Russia and Pakistan do form a close cooperative bond. We've also been joined on the line by Ambassador Ali Sarwar Naqvi Saab. Thank you for joining us, sir. Sir, the question is that we've seen Khwaja Asif in Russia meeting the Russian foreign minister, and a number of positive statements have come out from the Russian foreign minister's side. How do you see our bilateral relationship progressing under the current circumstances, sir?
I think the bilateral relationship has been growing by leaps and bounds, which is a very, very positive development ever since, if not earlier, 2015, when we had the defense cooperation agreement in the visit of the Russia.
Right, sir. And yes, sir, please continue.
Hello.
I think there's some technical problem in the line, sir. We're having some problems. We'll try and get in touch with you again. So coming back to the studio, let's talk about the statements made by Khwaja Asif, especially in terms of the IS threat that both Pakistan and Russia have now identified. Talking specifically about the IS threat, what role can Pakistan really play? Because at the moment, there are no IS militants in Pakistan or have not really overtly threatened Pakistan as yet.
If you look at the IS, first of all, we should look how grave the situation is in the region. They have now a quite huge presence in Afghanistan, and they have claimed some of the recent attacks in Kabul and Jalalabad, which has shook the world. Now, they have that increased presence there. On the other hand, in Pakistan, they may have sympathizers, or they may have one or two sleeper cells, and in Pakistan too they have claimed some of the attacks. but their presence is not that huge, and probably they are under control at the moment. The role of Pakistan here is this, because Pakistan has been, a player in this region. Pakistan is closely linked with the security of Afghanistan, and insecurity in Afghanistan always affects Pakistan. It spills over to Pakistan, and that's why Pakistan has legitimate concerns that there should be peace in Afghanistan. So to achieve that, Pakistan has, of course, its own expertise in the field of counterterrorism and in the region. We have worked with the United States, we have worked with Afghanistan, we have worked alone here as well to counter these threats. So we also have best practices. We know the local environment, which the Russia cannot know. So that edge that we have, that practically fighting the terrorism, and then that edge of local environment that we have here, it can really help them as well. And they can share their expertise, or let's say technology and training with us. So in that case, Pakistan can be of help to them. Also, Pakistan can always lend its diplomatic support to them. For instance, in this Afghan reconciliation process, Pakistan has been trying very hard, to make it happen, and that's why Pakistan started that Murray process here, but which was scuttled, later on. And Pakistan is still trying its best, to find a peaceful solution for that. So Russia can be made a part of it, because Russia is a regional stakeholder now, because it considers Afghanistan or the threat emanating from Afghanistan as real threats to its security.
Absolutely.
So it cannot ignore this place, and then it cannot ignore Pakistan being, the border country. We share so much with Afghanistan. For instance, we have 2.7 million refugees, and they've been living here for 4 decades. We have a porous border with them, which are now we are managing. So our security is quite closely linked with Afghanistan.
Absolutely. And when we talk about the presence of the IS militants in Afghanistan, it raises many question marks, especially what would be the real motivation of the relocation of the Daesh fighters from the Middle East to Afghanistan. Number one, they have suffered defeat in the Middle East, in Syria. So do you think that that is one of the reasons why they think that they can find a refuge in Afghanistan, or is there a more sinister plan that the IS is working towards?
I think partly that's one of the reasons, that because since it's defeated there, so some of them are coming back, or they want to find a new home. But most of these Daesh, as far as we know, that they were already the militants here. They morphed into Daesh, from previously from Taliban and other terrorist groups. So they morphed into it because this was what, widely, it was a gold currency in a terrorism market. Daesh, the new thing, because they had a territory, they had a caliphate, so it had a president. So people joined it, all over the world. And so it happened in Afghanistan. And you are also right that some of them, came here. Now, the more sinister that you say, because Daesh has a plan, for this region as well, which also includes Pakistan. That's why Pakistan is concerned a bit.
Does it just include Pakistan, or does
No,
it go
it's a
beyond
region.
Pakistan? It goes all the way to across India as well.
Yeah, India, they call it Khorasan, it's a province of Khorasan.
Is India a part of that?
Yeah. Parts of it.
Parts of
Parts
India
of the ancient Khorasan are. But I don't know if they want to include the whole India. But I don't think so it's going to materialize, since we have seen that almost all the terrorist groups so far, we have seen they've been defeated. They've been defeated, Daesh has been defeated in Syria and Iraq, and Pakistan have defeated its own terrorist groups here. So terrorists usually, they get defeated at the end. So we don't see that's going to happen. But for that to happen, to stamp out that threat, from that region, of course, there is a need of regional cooperation. Now, international cooperation, like the United States is leading, it's probably is not producing the desired results, because they've been here for the last 15 years, and we don't see the insurgency is going down anywhere. So probably new solutions are required, or regional players are, and they're concerned. For instance, China is also concerned Afghanistan, because it wants it to be part of the CPEC. It has its own trade agreements with Afghanistan, so they want also, peace in Afghanistan. And Russia, for that matter, is also very much concerned. So a regional approach probably is needed, because any insecurity in any particular country affects the region. It may not have global impact, but it would have regional impact. And because of that, then regional powers, the regional players should be involved in it. And I think this visit, this 4-day long visit where all these things were discussed, it would be very productive, or it would be a step forward in that direction.
Okay, Dr. Saab, one last comment I'd like you to comment on this, that the Pakistani Foreign Minister Khaja Asif said that Pakistan thinks the number of IS terrorists in Afghanistan has surpassed the Taliban groups mentioned on a daily basis by the Afghan and US command in Afghanistan, but there is absolutely no real acknowledgement by Kabul and Washington of such a large presence and proliferation of Daesh in Afghanistan. They don't even talk about it.
The numbers is always troublesome, you know. Sometimes the numbers cannot be correct because nobody's going there to do the census, but there is an estimation. So probably the estimation that our foreign minister has given, it may not resonate with what the Afghan government say. Maybe they're downplaying it. You know, sometimes for political reasons they do that. For Russia, I think when I follow the Russian news, they also show very great number of Daesh presence there. So we have different sources of this information. One is Pakistan, there is Russia, and the sources which do not match with the sources from United States and from Afghanistan. So I'm not myself very sure which figures to believe in, but it shows one thing, that the threat is quite real, and the threat is emanating from there, and it can, you know, threaten the security of not only Russia but also Pakistan, because we're the border region. And one thing I want to add, that the cooperation is going well between the two countries, but it should also be translated into trade.
And people-to-people contact.
People-to-people, very
That's the most
important. People, because they are long-term, you know.
Absolutely.
And exchanges of the scholars and even students. Our students should go there and study. So there should be more people-to-people contact as well, and civil society contacts.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sheryar Khan, for sharing your views with PTV World. Well, you heard the conversation, and we hope that the relationship between Russia and Pakistan improves and gets stronger with each passing day. And they are more important to Pakistan because they are part of this region. We'll take a short break here. When we come back, we'll be talking about the importance of a mother language. So take a break. We'll be right back.
The Festival of Lamps, or Mela Chiraga, is a very important and popular event in Pakistan. This is celebrated every spring on the last Friday of March outside the Shalimar Gardens. The show has been described as an eloquent expression of Pakistan's heritage and an authentic account of its agricultural and industrial achievements.
Naman behuda girde, naman behuda girde, poochao bazaar mein gardam.
The Fortress Stadium, the venue of the show, is thronged by active participants, foreign visitors, and people who watch the festival with great enthusiasm, verve, and aplomb. A large number of them are interested in watching and appreciating the best breeds of livestock. Many derive pleasure by watching other activities, such as the display parade of animals, dances by horses and camels, polo matches, tent pegging, dog shows and their races, daring acts of stuntmen, mass display of military band, rhythmical physical exercise by children, tastefully decorated industrial floats and torchlight tattoo shows.
बेहूदा गिरते
Additional attractions include a subtle interplay of lights to weave enticing patterns at night and breathtaking acts by foreign groups. Fairs and festivals of Pakistan.
Welcome back after the break. Today is the International Mother Languages Day, and we have very learned guests in our studios today. First of all, I'd like to introduce Haris Khalique. He is a poet and a activist. Thank you, Haris, for being here. And we've also been joined by Rimsha, who's a linguistic researcher. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much.
I'd like to start with you, Haris, because you obviously have a great command over languages since you are a poet as well. What's the importance and significance of observing such a day? I mean, there are a million languages spoken across the world. Some of them are dying, some of them are already dead. So what is it all about?
Waqas, that is exactly why it is important to observe not just this day, but to remind ourselves that how important it is to not to conserve, but actually to continue reading and writing in our mother languages. There's a bit of a history behind this International Mother Languages Day, which is being celebrated since 2008. It commemorates the Bengali language rights movement of 1952, when Bengali was also, as a consequence of that movement, Bengali was also declared one of the national languages of Pakistan in 1952 after a movement for the rights of the Bengali language. But there was a professor, I believe, or an activist of Bangladeshi origin in Canada who actually moved wrote a letter to Kofi Annan, and subsequently a resolution was moved in the UN, and this day was, is now observed. It is not just about one language, but all the mother tongues in the world. Because if you see how the world has evolved over the past 100, 150, 200 years, since the colonial days, there are certain languages which are used. There is no tension between the languages, as it were, or the writers of these languages, as it were. But when one certain language is used to dominate other languages and used as a tool to marginalize people who do not speak that language, then it becomes a problem, and it turns into a political problem. So International Mother Languages Day has two aspects. One is the purely humanitarian aspect in terms of saving languages, mother tongues of people in which my mother has spoken to me or your mother has spoken to you.
Is that really important, though? Because
I think it is very
as you mentioned...
I'll tell you why it is important.
There's a follow-up to the question, because you mentioned evolution as well, and all languages have evolved, and they are constantly in a state of evolution, and they're evolving all the time. So, having said that, what's there to preserve when the language itself is a living creature that is evolving?
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. That brings me to the second aspect, which is the political aspect. So if languages, you see, it's in human society, if the evolution is organic, or some languages have this linguistic affinity, so to speak, they merge, and with time, new languages evolve. That's how Urdu has evolved largely. That's how most of
I was
the-
going to ask you, but let me ask the researcher here this question. What would you say is Pakistan's mother language?
So yeah, that's again a very tricky and complex,
question.
very
It's a trick-
tricky
it
and
is a trick
complex question. But because he has mentioned the political aspect of it, and I guess being a researcher, we just cannot neglect the political history and the political, influence on the evolution of language. So we just cannot say that this particular language is the national language. All right, for the purpose of commonality or for the purpose of our own convenience, we declare Urdu as our national language. All right, it makes sense. But at the same time, we agree that there is this continuous evolution attached to the language. So when we see this mixture of, let's say, Urdu or English or Punjabi, kind of Creole language in our daily lives, I guess we need to revise our national language policy there. And at the same time, the regional languages, we just cannot snatch the status of, an important or significant language from that regional language. So it's a tricky question when we say that Urdu is the national language. Because
but
if
that
we
is not
analyze
is
Urdu,
that, would you say, Haris, would you say that it is also the mother language of Pakistan?
I think for some people it is the mother tongue, but for most of the people it is not the
when
mother
you're
tongue.
saying some,
but
then you're excluding a large number of
no,
people.
no. If you allow me to finish, you
Please,
see,
sorry.
Urdu again. The problem with Pakistan is that we leave our fundamental questions unresolved. There is no problem between Urdu and other, national languages of Pakistan. The problem, arises when you only teach Urdu to people who have Pashto or Sindhi or Balochi or Saraiki as their mother tongue. So so I think what we need is a multilingual policy where children learn Urdu and English, of course. Urdu is our, Urdu connects us in the whole region. It is one of our most important civilizational languages.
But don't you
But,
think
but it does not mean that we are not taught the other mother tongues, and children should have the choice. And it has to be. Traditionally, we have been a multilingual society.
And we need to follow
it
that.
is after the advent of the British that a kind of a monolingualism or a bilingualism was imposed. Most of our poets in the past, most of our thinkers in the past were multilingual, at least bilingual, but most of them were multilingual. And I think we should cherish that tradition. That brings back to us the most beautiful, cultural and literary, history and tradition that we have. If we lose our languages, then we are cut off from the beauty of our, the history and beauty of our literature and culture.
cultural diversity.
But is that really true? Because as you mentioned in your opening remarks, that after all, a language is only a tool, and a tool for communication. And if a tool is blunt and is not doing its job well enough, then shouldn't that tool be put in the shed and moved on to something better, or a better tool should be adopted in order to communicate? Or why is there the politicization of this whole issue of language? So
Language is not just about communication, Waqas, and I am taking Rimsha's time also, so I'll just be very brief. Language is not just simply about communication. Language is about your understanding of the universe and the subsequent articulation in terms of expressing your feelings as well as your thinking. So it is not simply a matter of a transaction between a fruit seller and I as a buyer of that fruit. It is actually something deeper than that. And that is why it is important that we, to be in touch with our
so you're talking about
with our
very
emotional
ephemeral
side.
and intangible things right here.
But that is what makes
No,
us human.
no.
Otherwise, those things are important, and they're not intangible necessarily.
It's not
Because if you look at for instance, the intellectual development of a people, they have to decide on a language to be used for their intellectual development. Fair enough. You think English is an advanced, and it is an advanced language. Then how many Pakistanis at this moment are able to converse fluently in the English language, or are being sent to English language schools, or are able to express themselves, their feelings and their thoughts in the English language? So that is where the political side of the matter gets highlighted, and where the English language, for instance, in case of Pakistan and many other countries, post-colonial British colonies, post-colonial countries, where English is used as a tool
One would
for
say
marginalizing.
it's now a lingua franca of the world.
It is not.
You don't think so?
It is not. It is one of the lingua francas of the world. The word lingua franca itself is French. So it is one of the 4 or 5 major languages, and but it does not mean. I mean, there's no point in taking any credit away from the English language. The point is that people should have the choice, and people should have the opportunity to learn their mother tongues. That is what we ask the state.
But again,
when
when you talk about the mother tongues that are spoken, let's say, for example, in Pakistan, there are, we say that the language changes after every 50 kilometers or less.
Yeah, there are 74 languages which are spoken, and
But not everybody speaks them.
Yes.
So,
nobody is saying that
what
if
is
I
the
don't want
value? Let me ask Rimsha that what is the value in preserving a language which is spoken by a very tiny minority of people in a small village somewhere in Pakistan? Why is that so important?
Yeah, but can I take a moment on that communication point, because I wanted to say something. Yes, communication utilizes language as a tool, but that was the outdated model. I teach language, and what we teach to students is that communication is actually the establishment of shared understanding. And how do you create that shared understanding? By utilizing the same linguistic signs, right? So saying that language is merely a tool to communicate is not right. It's actually the development of shared understanding. And when you say understanding or you're sharing something, it's much more than just passing on or utilizing or exploiting tools. Now, coming to your question, preservation of languages. I would like to ask a counter question. What's the point of, preserving that 100 or 1,000-year-old civilization which we have in Indus Valley? Why do we want to preserve those things?
I don't think that the two are equitable, because you can't really compare an entire civilization to just one aspect.
We have different signs in
Language
form
is an
of
aspect
painting.
of civilization as well. So it's just a tiny aspect. So
Do you think
civilization
so?
is much larger.
Do you think so? Let us just sit in silence and use our gestures to communicate. Would we be able to convey our
Well,
message
those who
properly?
can speak the sign language can. So that's another tool for communication by people who cannot speak or who are unable to use their vocal cords. But coming back to the real point,
So
is
you,
that the
you
language
think
is
that
a tool.
no, that is a tool that has different kind of beautiful aspects attached to it, including rhythm, including vocal techniques, including its own lyricism. You said that English is one of the lingua francas of the world, but Spanish is another language, important language.
Well, so is Arabic in certain areas. If you
Arabic?
if you just look at the number of people that are speaking a particular language.
Uh-huh.
So,
So-
there are a few languages that are very prominent in the world. Then there are languages which are spoken by a very tiny minority of people spread across the world, and there are thousands of those languages. Why is it so important to preserve those languages that don't really have any practical use for people you know,
To
generally.
preserve the culture of that tiny clan, I guess, if you're taking their linguistic
But what's the
identity
point?
away.
Because language, as you said, is a tool. Then what's the point
I
of
did not
preserving-
say that language is a tool. You said that language is a tool,
I
but
do
I say
admit
that
that.
it is, you know,
Is more than a tool.
it's more than that. It
You're saying
actually,
it's more than a tool.
yeah,
And it has, you know, some ephemeral and intangible aspects which cannot be
not
quantified.
intangible. Those aspects are tangible because you are creating a shared understanding
No,
within
but
a
that
community.
can only be shared by two people who speak the same language. If
And
they,
those
it
two
cannot
people
be
are
shared by a
important.
larger number of
Those
people.
two people are important individuals or elements of a community or a society.
Well, I fail to understand that point. Let me ask Haris. Haris, let's talk about a region in Pakistan, let's say southern Punjab, where Saraiki is spoken. Within Saraiki, there are 50 different dialects. There are families within the same village who speak 10 different languages. And they don't really understand what the other family is speaking to each other. What is the value of that?
You see, Waqas, the thing is that what human beings actually take pride in is their civilizations and their cultures and the way they have evolved from the animal kingdom, as it were. We are people who actually can speak from among all the creations of nature, and that is something that distinguishes us from the rest of the species,
yeah.
whatever nature or God has created. And language is something that is the the expression of our being different from
A dog or a cat.
other species in the universe that we know of. So I think it is very important to, and I don't actually use the term, I did use the term tool, but that is when I was saying that when language is reduced to being a tool for political purposes, that is a separate argument altogether.
No, but it's a tool for
But in terms
communication.
of-
A tool just for communication. Let's leave the politics out
yeah,
of it.
but you know that is even if you are communicating, what are you actually communicating, and what is that communication about? In terms of conservation, like you were saying, that even if there is a small dialect being spoken in a community or a tribe or a family for that matter, I mean there are languages which are limited to only families now,
Yes.
not just in Pakistan, across the world.
Across the world.
So I'm not suggesting that I don't actually like the word conserve or preserve. You use that language and it grows and evolves and its words get transported into another bigger tongue. If you use, and then there's a natural process of fertilization. I'm not against that natural process of fertilization.
So
What I challenge is
We're almost out of
that-
time, Haris. I'm sorry, but I want to interrupt you here because one last question, and that is that don't you think that the entire world, or which is the brotherhood of man, is moving towards one language which will be able to make them communicate amongst each other in a better, more effective way? And sometimes it also turns out that languages are used as tools for divisiveness. So there is always a negative and a positive
You
aspect
see,
to it.
languages are unifiers if they are used for art. They are dividers if they are used for politics.
We'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for sharing your views with PTV World, and I think that's the best statement for the conclusion of this program. Well, you heard the conversation, and we hope that everybody who is fond of linguistics does do whatever needs to be done to preserve their language, and indeed it is a part of everybody's culture, and they should. On that note, it's goodbye.
I think Pakistan's defense strategy was largely based on the land strategy. And out of our defense budget, we have been spending very less on Pakistan Navy. And of late, Admiral Abbasi, who is the new naval chief, has indicated that. And I think owing to the Indian threat and the posturing in the area, I think we need to strengthen our Navy also. And more significantly, we have to develop relationship with these countries Our Prime Minister is not seen visiting any country, and the Indians are busy doing that. Our economy, although it's working all right, given the circumstances, but I think that Pakistan has to assert more, and we are under a serious Indian threat of diplomatic encirclement and perhaps a naval deployment also.
Well, what does that say about our own policies, sir? What needs to be done? What corrective course needs to be taken to fix the
I think
situation that we are seeing developing in the region?
The first thing that needs to be done is that our relationship with our neighbors should be better than what they are right now.
Right, sir. And who's
we-
going to decide that?
and-
How are we going to get there?
And
That's the million-dollar question, isn't
I
it?
think we have a common ground with Iran. We have got no serious conflict with them. They are bordering Balochistan, in which, of course, we have to recognize that there is trouble. The Iranians will hate that any foreign power should come and sit there because it directly affects them. And Iranian relationship with the West and the Americans are not that good. They will be uncomfortable. So that is a huge area of cooperation between Iran and Pakistan. Plus culturally also, you know, the Indians are far away from the Iranians compared to Pakistan. When you come to writing of the Persian literature and exchange of views, and they're about 20%.
Well, there has been centuries-old communication between the Indians and the Iranians, sir. I mean, if you look at what was being read in the courts of Hindustan, it was all Persian, wasn't it? The Mughals used Persian as the official language, didn't they?
They were Mughals, they were not Brahmins.
Well, sir.
But all that trickled down back to Pakistan.
Right.
And Pakistan is a buffer state between the Iranians and the Indians. But you cannot base the Indian-Iranian relationship on that. Their revenue department had Persian, because they were Mughals, all right. If they were perhaps...
But they do have a great relationship, sir, as far as bilateral relations are
if-
concerned between any two countries. Iran and India
they
have
got very good relations.
have
But
good
I'll tell you,
relations. So
if the Indians were being ruled by the Brahmin dynasty, perhaps
maybe we'll be seeing that happening in the next couple of years or
All
so.
said and done, I think Pakistan needs to do more to develop its relationship
You
with
mean
Iran.
the Americans are right?
Not in that
We'll leave
way.
it at that,
Not
sir.
in
Thank
that
you very much for taking out the time and sharing your views with PTV World. Well, you heard the conversation, and in conclusion, we always like to say that following our Quaid-e-Azam's vision for Pakistan, we want good relations with all our neighbors and beyond, and that is Pakistan's foreign policy in a nutshell. We hope that the others also reciprocate our intentions. On that hope and on that note, it's goodbye. They're saying and our actions, which is why the Americans keep saying, do more, do more.
I think the part of the National Action Plan has been formally reversed when there was an agreement, and part of the agreement was basically a reversal. There were some clauses that about the misuse of the loudspeaker, and the government promised in writing that they can use that loudspeaker. So I think situation is fast changing. This is a particularly election year. So when you talk of religion, it's a very, 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 very sensitive issue. It has to be handled in a manner that we have to isolate extremists. We have to isolate militants who've been bombing our streets, who've been bombing our security forces. Any miscalculation in this very program, you might recall, I had predicted that if there is an police action against these protesters, there would be backlash across the country. And same thing happened. Now, as somebody who stands nowhere politically, our policy actions, our mishandling has literally made him a hero and his so-called party. So what are we doing? So I think there is a purely lack of political insight in our policy making. We are more reactive. We don't try to foresee the situation. And again, in this situation, I would insist, we must isolate extremists.
That is much easier said than done, Rana Saab. How would you propose doing such a thing? What real practical solutions do you suggest?
I think one thing, the law of the land should come into action as it has come in case of Mishal Khan. That is a positive sign. But now again, I have heard those speeches, and they are saying we have the evidence.
But did you see the reaction to that? There were some political elements, members of political parties who were celebrating the acquittal of those criminals.
That is the point I want to make. Now they are saying there are still Facebook accounts which are suggesting that he committed blasphemy. Now the government should come up with an evidence that who actually had those fake accounts, if those were at all fake accounts. And then there is allegations against
Do you
him.
know that this entire case was investigated
It
by,
was-
by the FIA, by the ISI,
They-
and the
they
top
they should
agencies
made it-
in the
they
country?
they should made
They
it
gave
proper.
them a clear bill, and then later on the level of the police investigation brought the case down. So that is where we are.
I
The
think,
legal
I
lacunas.
think there has to be greater debate about all these issues, because no one, no individual, no group of individuals can be allowed to take law in its own hand. Now we have to again handle it in a very sensible manner, because these people can propagate that you are playing in somebody else's game. You know, there is another important factor. Today, there were slogans. Yesterday, there were slogans that whosoever is a friend of Mishal Khan he is a traitor, and whosoever is a friend of a USA is a traitor. They are mixing up anti-American sentiments with the purely religious issue.
So can you imagine, sir, have you heard what Rana Saab had to say?
Yeah,
I
I
think they
heard
should go and meet the Chief of Army Staff, who says that, you know, we are friends with the US.
I tell you, I would like to suggest one thing on a government level and policy level.
Sir, very briefly, because we're
Very
almost out
briefly,
of time.
that politics from the education institute should be banned. They should not be, students should not be allowed. Some people say, no, these are nursery for politics. Okay, but there's a lot of time for politics with them. And then the vice chancellor or the principal should be good administrator also. With a good educationist, he should be a good administrator also.
So basically,
And
sir, the
third,
bottom line is
the
bottom line is that we need to really spend our resources and our energies in fixing our education system. That's
Yes.
primary and secondary.
There is no way out.
And that's the only way.
Yes.
Thank you very much, sir, for taking out the time and
I'm
sharing
very sorry
your
for
views.
coming late.
No problem, sir.
Thank
We
you very
understand.
much. Thank you.
Thank you very much once again for taking out the time and being on the show.
Thank you.
You heard the conversation, and in conclusion, we'd like to say that you may draw your own conclusions from what you've heard, but we hope and pray that the relationship that is souring between the US and Pakistan improves, and we see peace in our region specifically. With that hope and on that note, it's goodbye.